So you've just mentioned the idea that podcasts can change lives. And in a recent BBC article, you grew up learning that Western civilization was shaped by white European men. Given that your podcast is about history and a nuanced understanding of the past, how, if at all, do you believe this westernized education currently impacts our relationship with the government?
Ooh, good. Another great one. So I think that the way we are educated about history growing up, the way I was educated, anyone who grew up in the United States, I think it pushes you to see if you're a person of color or you're an immigrant or you're outside of that general narrative of what the greatness of European history is that birthed the United States. I think what it teaches you is that this isn't really your country, that ultimately you live here as an immigrant, but this isn't really the place that you helped to build, which proper teaching of history would completely negate that, right? Because the reality is the United States is a combination of the people that were brought from West Africa here, that were enslaved here, that helped build this country, Mexican Americans who helped build this country, Chinese Americans who built this. The list goes on and on, right? That's just I don't mean to leave anyone out. But this list of people from around the world that have come here to build this country is immense. And their histories matter. And their contributions to human progress matter. And the idea that philosophy and science is something that comes from Europe without any influence to the other parts of the world is something that gets under my skin. And that's really what that comment is about, is that I was taught one thing, but as I grew up and I learned more about history, I'm like, wow, actually, my ancestors played a really important part in the Enlightenment. You know, people from the Middle East and Islamic scholars played a vital role, and people from North Africa and West Africa played a vital role. Speaking of the conversation we just had, Jonathan, the one we did an episode recently about an Islamic scholar named Averroes, who was one of the biggest contributors to, I mean, his work was taught in the early European universities in the 12th century and 13th century. And he was an important, very important translator of Plato's work. So, Aristotle's work. A lot of Western Europeans at the time had no problem contributing their work to those people. It's just growing up in the kind of modern white supremacy we grew up in that kind of alters that view. And so I do think our relationship with the government and what our country is shaped by that history. And a way to break that is to teach history as it was without that kind of white supremacy lens. I think that'll change the way young people look at themselves in relation to their country and their identity as Americans.